Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flashback Fridays. Once again, the New York students and young professionals for Biden-Harris here in New York are taking over the Joe Biden for New York Facebook group to talk about an important issue. Last week, we talked about the Democratic National Convention. We are not going to talk about what's happened over the last few days. We're going to focus on positive things moving forward. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike Corbett. I'm one of the co-leads of New York Young Professionals for Biden-Harris, and I'm also one of the vice chairs of the New York State Democratic Party. Happy Friday, everyone. It is Friday, although I know time is a construct in these times, but celebrate that we're about to hit the weekend, and we're going to give you some really good information about voting in elections with our special guest, the chair of the New York State Assembly Election Law Committee, Chuck Lavine. But first, I wanted to take a moment to introduce some of our panelists that are joining us today. And I will start with Lizzie.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lizzie. I'm part of this great team for New York for Biden-Harris, young professionals and students, and I'm really happy to be here today.
All right, Lauren, you're next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren, and I'm also one of the co-leads with this wonderful team for the New York for Biden Young Professionals and also the president of the Nassau County Young Democrat.
All right, Selwa.
Hi, I'm a new member of the New York High Schoolers for Biden team and League 46. I'm a rising senior in upstate New York.
Greg.
Hi guys, I'm Greg. I'm also one of the panelists for Students and Young Professionals group here, and I just want to thank all of you for coming out on a great Friday afternoon.
And last but not least, Noah.
Hello everyone, and I'm the last panelist on today's Facebook Live. I'm another co-lead for New York for Biden Young Professionals and for the League 46 project. Thank you all so much for coming out today.
All right, I think we had a little bit of a technical glitch there. I think we had me seen while everybody else was talking, but you'll get a chance to see everybody in just a minute. But I wanted to give an opportunity for our special guest to join, who's joining us, to give a quick intro. He is from Nassau County, and as I mentioned, he is the chair of the New York State Assembly Election Law Committee. Please welcome Chuck Lavine. Chuck, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. So very briefly, two things I want to talk about. First, I want to thank the New York Young Professionals and Students for Biden-Harris and League 46. And I have to mention that my son, Greg, was a student at the University of Delaware and was Joe Biden's intern when Senator Biden was still Senator Biden. And I've gotten to meet Senator Biden a couple of times, and I think the world of him. But you might ask, what makes me so uniquely qualified to be the chair of the Elections Law Committee? And very briefly, I'm going to just describe this to you, and it involves a little ancient history. The first election that I have any recollection of was probably long before your grandparents were born. It was 1952. And we were living in a small town in the upper Midwest. And one day my mother walked me to our local police station, which was a pretty exciting experience for a almost 5-year-old, and put me on a counter, and she filled out a paper ballot and put it in a box, and we left. It was very interesting, very exciting. Now, my parents were very different people. My mother was a liberal Democrat, and my father was had certain rightist elements, not the worst that we see today, certainly. But when he came home, he wanted to know where had we been, and my mom said she had taken me to vote, and he said, "Well, who'd you vote for?" And she said, "Adlai Stevenson." I remember him grabbing me with a big cigar hanging out of his mouth, burning cigar, throwing me in the back of his car, and we drove back to that little police station, went into that same curtained off little area. He sat me on the same counter. He filled out a piece of paper, put it in a box, and he said, "We just voted for General Eisenhower, and he's going to win." Well, my father was right. And so I suppose what makes me uniquely qualified to be chair of the Elections Committee is that the first experience I ever had with voting, I managed somehow to have voted twice for president of the United States when I was 5 years old. So I'm keenly aware of glitches and anomalies, I guess by nature, in our voting system. But it's a great honor to be the chair of the Elections Committee. And I'm going to conclude in just a moment with a major shout out to Zelnor Myrie, who's my Senate counterpart, and the Senate Democrats, because all of the things that we have accomplished to advance voting rights in New York State over the last year, almost 2 years now, would never have occurred if we did not have a Democratic state Senate. The most minor of changes that we fought for in the assembly were just brushed off, and we got the back of the hand from the Republican state senators. That it's a different day, and thank goodness it's a different day, because each of us knows how critically important it is to vote. Thank you. End of my stump speech.
Thank you very much, Chuck. We really appreciate it. So we'll get to the questions in just a minute, but I just wanted to remind all of the viewers, as Chuck mentioned and I mentioned, this is New York Students and Young Professionals for Biden-Harris. We do a phone bank every Tuesday at 6:30. We also help run the Wonder Woman Wednesdays phone bank as well. Throughout the time while we're on here, we'll get you the links to those in the Facebook chat. But I wanted to get right to the questions. And the first question comes from Selwa.
Hi, thank you. So my first question for you is, how do I register to vote, and when should I register to vote by so I can be ready to vote in November?
Well, the last day on which you can register to vote is October the 9th. However, October the 9th is really not too far away from us right now. It is a little more than a month and a half away. Registering to vote can be done in one of two ways. Someone can go online and actually fill out the form, and I'll describe to you what you need. What you'll need to register is the same material you'll need whether you register online or register in person. So these are the qualifications. You have to be a citizen. You have to be 18 years of age by December the 31st. You have to be a resident of the state and the county, city or village for, and this is important, for at least 30 days before the election. You can't be in prison or on parole for a felony conviction unless someone has been paroled and pardoned or had citizenship rights restored. Cannot be adjudged mentally incompetent by a court, and you cannot claim the right to vote elsewhere. The qualifications, what you'll need in terms of proof is a New York State driver's license, a permit, or non-driver identification card. The zip code currently on record for you with the Department of Motor Vehicles, and a social security number. That's what you need. So you can register New York State Board of Elections, New York State Department of Motor Vehicles, and it's a fairly easy proposition to be able to do that. And what I would suggest everyone do is to register to vote as early as possible, and do not wait till any of the deadlines. In fact, this year, whatever deadlines we talk about are statutory deadlines. If you really want your vote to count, and after all, you really should want your vote to count, you have to exercise your rights as early as possible. The longer you wait, the more likely it is there'll be some glitch, or the more likely it is that your vote will be challenged. And the Republicans have a long and storied history at this point of challenging the rights of people to vote, especially the rights of younger people.
Well,
so do it now.
In that vein, Chuck, I think our next question is fairly relevant from Noah. It's another registration question, but since we have so many people who are young professionals and students who may be voting for the first time, I think registration, we should really flesh everything out. So Noah, what's the next question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Sendelman, for coming on. And the question that I have for you is, how do I know if I'm registered, and do I need to re-register to vote if I move or if I'm studying away from my hometown?
If you're moving within New York State, you don't have to re-register. Provisions were adopted within the last couple of years, allowing for one's registration to be transferred to wherever one moves within the state of New York. I suppose you can find out if you are registered by going to the New York State Board of Elections website. And there's a certain button you can pursue there that will ask for your name and your address, and they'll tell you where you are registered to vote and if you're registered to vote. Someone who wants to can also contact their Board of Elections, their local Board of Elections as well.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right. Some really good info. As I mentioned, Joe's going to be putting links about the relevant topics we're discussing in the chat, but I want to kick it over to Lizzie with our next question.
Great. So my question is that if I don't want to vote in person on election day this year because of the pandemic, what are my options? I've heard about early voting. I also heard about absentee and mail-in ballots. I'm confused with the difference between those two things. And what are all the deadlines and dates for that?
All right. So we will have early voting in New York State, and you can find out which locations are available through your local boards of election. And you can vote starting October the 24th up until November the 2nd. Those are the dates for early voting. The date for voting on the actual election is November the 3rd. Our experience with early voting throughout the state has been varied. Oddly enough, the counties that have led in terms of early voting throughout the entire state have been Nassau County and Erie County, all the way in Western New York. We saw a pretty good response to early voting the first time we did it. Now, we saw not quite the same response at all in terms of the numbers of people coming out for the recent primary, because people were concerned and people were frightened. So if someone does not want to go in person to vote, either on the early voting days or on the date of the election, that person can request an absentee ballot. For our purposes today in New York State, there is no difference between an absentee ballot and voting by VBM, voting by mail. You request the ballot, which you can do right now, and the Board of Elections will send you the absentee ballot. You can download the request for the absentee ballot, fill it out, and get it back to the Board of Elections. Excuse me, I'm just going to close the door while my dog Mona is barking.
The benefits of live television, folks. You never know what'll happen. Go ahead,
My
Chuck.
dog Mona Lisa, and that's the name they gave her at the shelter, is a big fan of voting. So at any rate, you'll want to get an absentee ballot request in. This is the drop dead date. It's I'm sorry, I believe it is, I'll have to dig that up, but it is a few days before the election. Do not do that. Request your absentee ballot as early as possible and get it in as soon as possible. The absentee ballots themselves will not be mailed out until, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of October the 8th or October the 9th. Get them back as soon as possible. You can actually deliver them in person to the boards of election. You can deliver them in person to the to the early voting sites, and you can deliver them in person to your voting site on November the 3rd. If you're going to vote by mail, do it as early as possible. We saw what happened especially in Brooklyn and parts of New York City where the boards of election, local boards of election, were overwhelmed with absentee ballots, votes by mail, and it took them so long to be able to tabulate those votes and put them in the right boxes. Each one has to be put in a box for each of the various assembly districts in which people are voting. And it's a very time-consuming experience. And we have to remember as well that far too many Board of Elections employees were ill with COVID as well, and we're not at work. So the earlier the better. I will say this, anyone who's been following our president knows that our president is going to do everything and anything he can to make sure he is declared president, and seems to be that he wants to have that declaration made on election day itself. Now, realistically speaking, in New York State, Trump will probably end up with a small number of votes. I don't remember the proportion he got last time, but it was pretty embarrassing. But after all, we know him. He was a New Yorker. But I think that all of us owe it to our brothers and sisters in other parts of the United States to make sure that they do everything they can to vote by mail. And if they do that early, and if they're going to go out and certainly vote in person. I will be voting in person. I did it last time. I also went to most of the early voting sites in Nassau County. And as opposed to other counties, Nassau County's early polling sites were very lightly attended. I voted on election day at one of those sites, and there weren't a lot of people there on that day as well. This is our world. It is a world in which we face a plague. But I will say this, that we passed a bill, it was Jeff Dinowitz's bill in the Assembly, defining fear of disease, fear of contracting disease, as a qualifying factor to vote absentee. The rightist elements tell us that our Constitution, our state Constitution, does not allow for voting by mail because of illness. However, I am a practicing lawyer and was involved over the years in quite a bit of complex litigation. And I think I know how to read a statute, a constitution, as well as almost anybody. And if anyone looks at our New York State's Constitution, it is perfectly clear that illness does qualify as a factor. We still, however, are concerned and worried that Trump and his sycophants are going to try to make an issue out of this. In New York State, get out and vote. If you're out of New York State, go and vote.
Absolutely. I think that that sort of covers everything regarding voting. You even covered a little bit of in-person voting there as well, which is great. And again, let's not forget the person who is trying to stop all this from happening. Chuck, if you don't mind for just one brief second, we had somebody join the call who is actually down in Washington, D.C. right now for the march, our New York State lead, Nye Whitaker, who just wants to kind of give a quick sort of update of what's going on down there. Nye, the floor is yours.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Happy Friday, everyone. I bring greetings from the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. It has been a powerful day. We've been out here since 7 in the morning and just completed the actual march. There's been a ton of powerful speakers calling for the end to systematic racism and police brutality, calling upon all of us to make sure we vote like our lives depend on it, because they do, and calling upon everyone to complete their census. So students and anyone who can hear me, please be sure that you go to my2020census.gov today and complete your census, and text VOTE, V-O-T-E, to 30330 to get information that you will need to make sure you can take action so that we can win on November 3rd. I also just wanted to thank all of the amazing students and young professionals on this call and thank our assemblymen for joining us. Please, please, please connect to us at www.newyorkforbiden2020.com or email us at newyorkforbiden@gmail.com. We host phone banks every day of the week. We have great conversations and community events, virtually, of course, like this one. And we have numerous ways that you can connect, whether it's texting, phone banking, or just calling friends and writing postcards. We have a way for you to take action and make sure that we bring home a victory on November 3rd. The Great Washington Monument is here. I'm steps away. I don't know if you can see from the African American Museum, maybe too far, but there is history here and it's symbolic. And I think it's important that on this day of the march, that my team is back at home having this powerful conversation of what students and young people can do to vote. Also just want to do a shameless plug that if you are a student who's from a swing state, if it's not too late, please cast your vote there at home. North Carolina, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, Pennsylvania, and on and on. Your vote really matters and it matters even more there. So thank you so much for letting me pop on. Thank you all for your great work. And I look forward to seeing you when I'm back in New York.
Thank you very much, Nye, for joining us. Very important March on Washington, the 57th anniversary, and what a backdrop, the Washington Monument right behind you. All right, let's get back into the questions. I think our next question is coming from Greg.
Thank you, Assemblyman, again for coming. So my question is, Assemblyman, I live in Westchester County, and many people on Election Day had long wait times in order to cast their ballots. So I'm wondering if you could provide some insight as to how, come Election Day in November, we can avoid some of those same problems.
Well, I'm hoping that people will take advantage of early voting. I know that there were some particular issues in some locations in Westchester County. Early voting counts as much as voting on Election Day. We are learning as we go. We have not had that much experience with early voting in New York State, and now it's been complicated by the COVID crisis. We will get better and better and better at this as years go by. But as far as on Election Day, people have to, unfortunately, be patient. Our tradition in New York State, and there's rules and regulations to this effect, is that someone is not supposed to stand in line for more than 1/2 hour to cast their ballot. But we know that there are problems that do arise. Sometimes there are problems with the scanners. Sometimes there are problems with the poll inspectors who tend to be elderly, not being able to appear on Election Day for whatever reasons. So we will learn. We are getting better and we will get better. But I was very moved in my life by two things when it comes to voting. In 2012, I was campaigning for Hillary Clinton at the same time as my son was campaigning for Barack Obama. I was in northern New Hampshire. He was in Manchester. And in Manchester, New Hampshire, I saw people wait literally hours and hours and hours in the cold, although it wasn't brutally cold, to cast their ballots. And I also grew up in the state of Wisconsin. And I only want to share with you how outraged I am to this day that a Republican state legislature and a Republican Supreme Court, partisan, you'd expect the legislature to be partisan. We're Americans. We don't expect our courts to be partisan. And that's part of what's at play in this election on November the 3rd. But Wisconsinians were forced in the midst of some of the worst days of the COVID infections to have to go out and vote. But to their credit, they did that and they secured the right results. So there's something innately and inherently American about wanting to make sure that your voice counts. And on the subject of having your voice count, let me just mention something. I think that a question came up about when is the last day on which you can request an absentee ballot and request it. And that last day is October the 27th, but people should not wait until October the 27th to request their absentee ballots. People should request them as soon as possible and get them in as soon as possible. After all, the right to vote means nothing if the right is defined as a citizen's ability to be able to check off someone's name on a ballot. The right to vote only counts if that ballot counts as much as everybody else's ballot counts. And that means those ballots have to be in, they have to be in early, and the future of our nation is at stake. Thank you, Greg.
Once again, we're talking with New York State Assembly member Chuck Lavine. A couple more quick ones for you, Chuck, if you don't mind. I know your friend Lauren has been waiting patiently to ask a question, and I certainly want to give her the opportunity.
Thanks. Hi, Lauren.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, Assemblyman Lavine. It's so
And-
good to meet you.
And Lauren, let me just interrupt. I don't know what other people's protocols are, but my parents certainly did not name me Assemblyman. So either Charles or Chuck, and that's fine. And Lauren, I know you know my name.
All right, well, it's so good to see you, Chuck. So my question for you is, if I mail my ballot in, what reassurances do I have that my vote will be counted?
Well, this year, thanks to a bill that I had, and thanks to an executive order signed by Governor Cuomo, if you submit your absentee ballot and there is some problem with it, either you haven't signed the envelope in the right space, or the signature is smudged because of the mail, or the envelope is not properly sealed. The Board of Elections, within 1 day of making that determination, has to get in touch with the voter, has to do their best to get in touch with the voter and give the voter the opportunity to cure. In the future, there'll be a longer period of time for them to do this. But because we passed this bill only a few weeks ago, and it would be unfair to task the boards of election, which are overwhelmed to begin with everything they have to do, to take extra time to return the envelope or get in touch with the voter. It's a shorter period of time for this year, but that is a good way to do it. Now, Lauren, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if there is presently a mechanism for a voter to know if their absentee vote has actually been tabulated. The numbers of absentee ballots that were rejected in the primary were astronomical. In Queens alone, I believe it was over 50,000 that were rejected. At that time, the voter never knew. Now we'll have a mechanism for the voter to have some sense of whether there's a problem and the opportunity to correct it. I strongly believe that in the days to come, we will be enhancing those rights for people who vote by mail. But I don't know if there is any definitive way to find out if someone's vote has actually itself been tabulated. And you can't really do that either when you vote in person. But that day may come as well. And I strongly suspect that it will.
I think so too. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
All right, we're just about ready to wrap up. I've got one last question for you, Chuck, and I just want to kind of talk about dispelling a rumor, because I know the other side likes to talk about voter fraud a lot. Can you sort of separate the fact versus fiction when it comes to voter fraud? Because I think it's more likely to be struck by lightning twice than see an actual legit case of voter fraud. So I'll leave you with that question.
The actual studies in the states that have this are beyond persuasive, that the prospect of voter fraud in elections in which there are a lot of absentee ballots or votes by mail is so infinitesimal. It is 0.0006%. Some people think it's even less than that. Let's face it, if someone is a young person and they are going to vote, and they're voting, especially if they're voting outside the metropolitan areas, they may very well be challenged, and historically they're going to be challenged by the Republican Party. The Republican Party, for some reason, believes that they're in jeopardy when more people vote. There is no scientific basis for this whatsoever. Republicans managed to get themselves elected in Republican states that have voting by mail, but it is a fear. And if we go back 30 years, you can actually see on YouTube Paul Weyrich, who was the Republican guru, a right-wing guru, addressing in person a Republican gathering, saying, the more people who vote, the worse it is for us. We're going to lose. Trump has said it himself. We are Americans. We believe in the right to vote. We believe that our opinions count and count as much as the next person's. So the rumor mongers and the fear mongers who claim that voting by mail is inherently fraudulent are patently lying. How's that? Patently lying. That's not even a good term of words. If someone's lying, they're lying. They are lying. It's a lie.
Well, we want to thank you so very much, Chuck Lavine, chair of the New York State Assembly Election Law Committee. He represents the 13th district, which is parts of Nassau County, and actually including my brother Bobby and sister-in-law Judy, who live in Woodbury. You represent them. So
perfect. Make sure they vote.
I believe me, they will be voting. I speak with my sister-in-law a lot, and she sort of makes sure that the votes happen out there. Thank you so much, Chuck. If folks would like to follow up, would you be okay with us sharing your email address?
I have just placed my email address and my phone number on in the chat box. So any questions, please reach out. And I can't thank you enough. You all know that this is the most important election of your lives. And we have to make sure our brothers and sisters, not only in New York State, but throughout the United States, vote. We cannot have it happen again that a president is elected with substantially less than the popular vote. We cannot have that happen. We see the damage done. We have the chance to undo the damage. President Kennedy used to say that an error does not become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. This is our opportunity to correct one of the great mistakes of American history. I thank you all, and I'm counting on you to win this election. Everybody, be well, and thanks again.
I couldn't think of a better way to close us out. Thank you so much again, Chuck, for joining us. I also want to let folks know who are watching, if you feel that there's a question you'd like asked, you can, of course, send it to Chuck, but you can also send it to us. Put it in the comments of this Facebook Live, and we will make sure to answer it for you. And if there's a need to potentially do another election-specific, voting-specific Facebook Live event, we're happy to do so. And Chuck could join us again. And you mentioned Zelnor Myrie. We also had reached out to him. You got back to us first, so that's why you're here and he's not. But we'll make sure that that Zelnor is included in the next one.
The best example of voting early.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's a good way of putting it. So thanks to our panel, Selwa, Greg, Lizzie, Noah, and Lauren. Once again, I'm Mike, and we thank you again for joining us on this Flashback Friday, and we hope to see you again next week.